Hello, Assalamualaikum. Very good morning. Salam sejahtera and salam satu Malaysia to all of our panel for the presentation today. And my name is Muhammad Izzat Azri. Also alongside me, my member of the group, Dayang Siti Zahara binti Abang Sidik, Jessica Wilson, and Ralph Balan Langit. As for today, our group will be presenting the Environmental Management System ISO 14001 and the financial performance. So without further ado, we go straight to the introduction. So as for introduction, I would like to touch about the definition of the environmental management system, ISO 14001 and financial performance. So what is that actually? This thing stands for the standard required the businesses to identify and manage the environmental aspect and the impact resulting their, from their operation. So the studies that we are going through is that in order to analyze the relationship between the ISO 14001 certification and the financial performance, specifically in Malaysia. So the data was from 201 public listed companies in the manufacturing sector for the year of 2021. So out of 201 companies, 23 are certified with ISO 14001. So moving on to the next slide. So my next point today for is the objective for our research. Is the main objective is to explore the relationship between ISO 14001 and certifications for the company's financial performance. So the first thing we would like to mention, we would like to study is to measure the significant positive relationship between the adoption of ISO 14001 underscore DB and the return of asset ROA of the companies. So there is a significant positive relationship between the adoption of ISO 14001 and also the return on equity of the companies that are certified. So, and last but not least, the objective of our research is to ensure the ownership and the firm size of the companies that are certified ISO 14001. So moving on to the next point, which is hypothesis. So there are two hypotheses that we are going to elaborate, which is H1, hypothesis 1, which is there is a significant positive relationship between adoption of ISO 14001 and return of asset ROA of the companies. And also the hypothesis for number 2, there are significant positive relationship between the adoption of ISO 14001 and also for the return on equity of the company, which stands for ROE for the companies. So continuing to the next slide, which is the problem statement. So what is the problem statement is all about? So for a problem statement, we'll outline the negative point of the current situation for us, for our studies, and to explain why it is matters to be solved. So from our perspective, from our studies, we have three problem statements that we would like to highlight in the studies, which is how committed are the companies in the manufacturing, the environmental sustainability, or to do better environmental management system benefits a company financial performance, or can the ISO 14001 certification can make a difference to reduce emission and help a business thrive better with the environmental management also to be preserved and as a stakeholder. So moving on to the next slide will be presented by my friend Dayang Siti Zahara. Yes, please.
Thanks, Izzat. I'm the second presenter. My name is Dayang Siti Zahara binti Abang Side. I'll represent the literature review for empiricals and theoretical and also theoretical frameworks. The first slide I'll represent is the literature review for theoreticals, where you have two theories. The first is agency theories and the second is the cost benefit theories. For the agency theories, our research is referring to Marco, Sartos, and Guad Arzos, the quality management journals, whereby the theme are environmental sustainability has inquired transactions in both the commercial and academic worlds. For the cost-benefit theory publication of Albert et al. 2010, the aim of our project is ISO14001 and financial performance. Therefore, the theme that we use is to be able to determine the cost impact of implementing ISO14001 accreditations on organizations. For the literature review empirical, the first and the second author is more focused on ISO 1401, where it's more connect with our research paper. The theme for the first author is positive relationship between ISO 1401 and SMEs performance, and the second author theme is ISO 1401 as important variables for environmental management accounting. The theme for the third publisher journals, various arguments have been made regarding the relationship between companies, corporation, and social responsibilities, particularly in terms of environments and its financial performance, where is focus also with our research paper, where is financial performance. The fourth theme, it has been predicted the improvement in environmental management will result in decrease in profitabilities, authors by Berner and Solomon in 2006, Pururaj and Jong in 2009, and Albertini in 2013. The fifth theme is complete both environmental and core business activity at the same time, journal by Classis and McLaughlin 1996, Hall and Rotherberg 2008. The final theme is the business must choose between environmental responsibilities and financial performance, authorized by Herazi, Cesar Vittoria, ELH 2011, Albertini 2013. That's all. So this is the last I will present is theoretical frameworks. The studies theoretical framework in which ISO 1401 certificates serve as a proxy for EMS and ROA and ROE represents financial performance variables. Under independent variables is ISO certificate, where if the manufacturing company using ISO certificate, we put it as a 1 and or 0 if it doesn't use. Under control variable is firm size, ownership for local, foreigner, and joint venture, where these independent variables and control variable are connecting with dependent variables. So under dependent variables is financial performance, ROA and ROE present financial performance variables. So that's all for me. Thank you. The next slide will be presented by Jessica Wilson.
This is the variable table. The first one is the independent variable, referring to the ISO 14001, categorized into two, which is dummy 1 and also dummy 0. That refers to the company that adopt the ISO 14100. We classify it as 1. The company that does not adopt the 14001 ISO, we classified it as 0. And then the second part is the control variable. For control variable, we can see from the table is referring to the firm size. So the firm size, the data is collected from the total asset of companies. It has 3 dummies, which refer to the first one has the small firm size, Number 2 is the medium firm size, and the last one will be the big firm size, and it is known as X2. The control variable, the second control variable referring to the ownership, the first one is local, followed by foreigner, and the last one is joint venture. So under this control variable of ownership, we also have 3 dummies, 1, 2, and 3. And the last part is the dependent variable. The dependent variables that we are using in this study referring to the financial performance, which is the ROA and also the ROE. For concept maps of methodology, the first one is descriptive analysis. Number 2 is normality test. Number 3 is correlation analysis. Number 4 is linear regression test. And the last one is analysis of variance, known as ANOVA. This is the model equation of our study, where the dependent variable is y equals to the beta null plus beta 1 times independent variable y1 plus beta 2 times second independent variable y2 plus the beta 3 times independent variable 3 plus the error. So in this equation, the dependent variable that our group is using is ROA and also ROE equals to the beta null or the constant of the model and plus beta 1 times the first independent variable. So the first independent variable in our study, we are using ISO 14001 plus the beta 2, which is the coefficient of this second independent variable. The second independent variable of our study, we are using firm size. So the firm size, we are looking at the total asset, and the total asset we break it into 3 groups, which is we categorize it into small, medium, and also big. And then from this equation, we plus the third independent variable, where the third independent variable is referring to the ownership, which is the local, foreign, and the last one joint venture. So the last part of this equation is the error. So in this equation, we can sum it up. Dependent variable, which is the y, equals to beta null, which is the constant of the model, plus beta 1 times independent variable y1 plus beta 2 times second independent variable, which is the firm size y2 plus beta 3 times the independent variable 3, which in this model is referring to the ownership, and the last one will be the error. This is the normality test result for our group. From the table, it shows the skewness analysis, Jack-Pera analysis, and the last one, probability test for our dependent variables. The dependent variables that we are using here is ROE and ROA. As we can see from the Jack-Pera analysis, the figure is large. Under the ROE, it shows 736%. For the ROA, it shows 390%. So when the Jack-Pera analysis show a large number, it indicates that the errors are not normal distributed. And we can also refer to the probability test. Under the ROE row, it shows 2.5%, which is below the p-value of 5%. And then the ROA is large figure, about 14%, more than the p-value of 5%. So this shows that when p-value is below than 5%, which reflects the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis of this study.
As for the correlation analysis, both variables, the return on equity and return on assets, recorded p-values of less than 5%. Therefore, this analysis proves that the ISO certification has no significance on return on equity and return on assets. Based on the linear regression test results, the ISO14001 certification to the return on equity variable showed an F statistic of 2.73, indicating that the regression model fits. As for the adjusted R-squared, there was a 4.9% variance among all variables, and the t-value recorded indicates that with the adoption of the ISO, there will be a 245% increase in the return on equities. As for the return on assets, the F statistic shows 3.06, also indicating the regression fits, and a 5.7% of variance among all variables, and indicating that with the adoption of ISO, there will be a 209% increase in return on assets. It is important to note that the adjusted R-squared values are small, indicating that there are other variables not in use for this study. Finally, for the ANOVA test, both variables, return on equities and return on assets, recorded a probability of 0.00, making them both significant and supporting the hypothesis, and that the linear model is overall valid. And so, to conclude, this study has revealed differing results in the tests and analysis we have conducted. But in the end, both hypotheses were supported, where the first one, that the ISO certification does have a positive relationship with the return on equity, and hypothesis 2 on the return on assets of a company. However, the normality test did reveal that the data that we have is not normal. A reason for that is probably due to the fact that we had insufficient data, but since this was an exercise, we went on to produce the results as shown. A recommendation for future studies is to expand the scope of companies to include non-public listed companies with ISO certification. On top of that, we also recommend for future studies to study these companies over a period of time instead of just for one financial year. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude our presentation, our group presentation, and we wish to thank our distinguished lecturer and the panel of jury as well.